When you're taught at such a young age that your sexuality is a demon, you don't just get over it by coming out.
Hi, I'm Gracie Mercedes, and welcome back to Not Blank Enough, a podcast about everyday insecurities and triumphs. In this episode, I'm talking with my dear friend Kenton Chen, who's a singer, songwriter, and actor. He's also the son of a pastor, queer, and Asian, so we went deep on what it's like to grow up in America as such. Religion was a big topic of conversation and had me reflecting on my own religious upbringing. So much so that it inspired me to add a new piece to this podcast called Afterthought. At the end of each conversation, I will start sharing any afterthoughts that come to mind for me with you. I hope you enjoy this new edition and my conversation with Kenton that we titled Not Safe Enough. Well, welcome, Kenton, to Not Blank Enough. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
I guess we can start by telling everyone how we know each other. We met in acting class, originally at BGB.
Yes.
And then met again, I guess, or got closer from being at IDSA together, which is another acting conservatory.
Mm-hmm.
So we've gotten way closer, and it's been great to know you. You're a singer, songwriter, actor, all-around amazing person. And so I wanted to have you on because I want to hear more about your background. I don't really know that much about your early childhood or your beginnings at all.
Yeah, we don't really. It doesn't come up in a regular conversation. I don't suppose that I actually really even talk about it very much. I would say really I learned a lot more about you just from listening to this podcast.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And just I think through this pandemic and whatnot, we've actually had brought up some things and with our hangouts among our friends, I just feel like it's been really nice to actually connect on a deeper level and talk about things that we don't bring up in regular conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's like the one positive of the global pandemic is
Yeah.
it almost feels like your time with friends feels more not important, but
I would say yeah. I think it's more present.
Yeah, more present. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah, it's like I would say for me, it's really cut all the fat in terms of I don't really have friendships of convenience anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Every person that I speak to, connect to, is all absolutely deliberate.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I love that. I think I've always wanted to do that and be that person, but I just never felt bold enough to tell people, hey, we're not going to hang out, because that feels rude.
Wait, that's interesting. I love that we're already getting somewhere because you're still not really talking about your upbringing, which I'm going to make you talk about.
I am a pastor's kid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I grew up in Irvine, the child of two immigrant parents, of course, two immigrants from Taiwan, and my father was a minister growing up. And that whole experience, while I think it was very good to have a faith-based upbringing, and it brought me a sense of stability that I think, especially as immigrants, you wouldn't necessarily have. I think there was a lot of challenges that I had to endure, especially as in case you can't tell by the way I speak, as a queer child, as a gay kid. Yeah, there's this term that we call it pastor's kid, or PK,
Okay.
for anybody out there that is of that upbringing. We all seem to know that lingo. When someone says, I'm a PK, we all go, oh.
Okay, so what does that mean? Like in simplest terms for those of us who may not know, when you say PK to another PK, what does that signify when you say PK to somebody?
I mean, obviously, we're not a monolith. They're very, very different. It depends on which denomination and whatnot. But the things that come with it are so similar, which is that your parents' ability to keep their job depends on your reputation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's
Yeah.
a lot of pressure.
And whether or not you want to play the rebel or you want to play the golden child is kind of in your hands, or at least you feel that pressure. Most of us do grow up very, very, very religious, and we are devout. And then at some point, it will flip for people, and they will, rebel. It happens often when they go to college and whatnot. But sometimes it happens way before in high school or middle school. But you feel that pressure, and it's the smallest thing. As like I remember, there was this one. So I played in the orchestra that my dad conducted because he was a music pastor.
Oh,
It was. I mean, I'm a 15, 16-year-old punk kid. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna talk back to my parents. That's just what we do. I remember I got up to go to the bathroom and my dad said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to the bathroom. Is that okay?" Like, what? And then that was fine. And then that night I get a talking to from my mother who says, so-and-so's parent called me to say that you talked back to your dad during rehearsal today.
oh, wow.
And I remember thinking, you have got to be kidding me.
And that doesn't even sound that bad. I mean, it's a little sassy, but it wasn't.
No, I was not. I literally just said, "Is that okay?" Because I think I'm pretty sure I felt like I was micromanaged. But it's almost like if your parent was a teacher at the school you attended, except for this has to do with your morality. And,
Right.
If you were a bad kid, it doesn't mean that your dad is a bad teacher. It literally means that he doesn't know how to shepherd his people. And so I was often told, like, you have to do better because your dad's job depends on it.
Wow. So maybe it was like not well behaved enough. I mean, you basically always had to be on your best behavior so that people wouldn't basically talk crap about your dad or his ability as a pastor.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was not exemplary enough. And I still feel that pressure a lot. I think that has stayed with me over the years, and it took me a really long time in therapy to kind of unpack that, in the fact that, so then I started developing, especially as a gay kid, I developed the survival instincts. So I have these personality traits that I think it's interesting because it has come up with some friends in the past where when we discuss it, it feels a little incendiary when they talk about it. But I'm being very honest when I say this. I have developed into a charmer, and it is completely unconscious. It's the way I learned how to move about the world. When I go into a room, my mind will automatically scan for the energy, like, what is this? Am I safe here? What are these people like? What can I say? What can I do?
So it was your coping mechanism, basically.
Yeah. What can I say? What can I do that's not going to get me in trouble? That's not going to put me in danger. That's not going to put my dad's job in danger. But also, when I'm not in those circles, I'm not thinking what am I going to do to make me liked, but more as what am I going to do to keep me safe?
Wow, interesting. And how old were you when you came out?
I was around 15, 16.
Okay. And then how did your parents react to that, especially your dad?
So I came out to everybody in the world except for my parents. We just never talked about it.
What? How did you keep that from them? Like, if everyone else knew, how did you keep it from your parents?
Well, my parents, they don't really speak English.
Okay.
And willful ignorance is a very powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we just never talked about it. There were always rumors. I know that my sister had told me that my mom had heard rumors from other parents. I never talked about it at church or anything. And in fact, it's a whole thing. I dropped out of church midway of high school because I just couldn't do it anymore, which actually, so I made this deal with my parents. I would go to another church because it just was too much. And I ended up being hired as a section leader for a church that my high school choir teacher was actually directing. So I ended up going to another church and singing there, and he would pick me up. It was a whole different experience. And they were a very accepting church. So I honestly think that it was a different experience when I went somewhere else, but I still had that voice in the back of my head. And it's always this pressure of, am I being a shining beacon? Am I doing things to not just make my parents proud, but to keep myself from being suspicious? And then when I got older, it was really hard to flip because then you have this kid who's now kind of been squashed down to this personality built off of survival instinct, who's just basically has no real opinions of anything.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, what's going to get me by? To then feeling like, okay, so now I'm in college and now I have these different circles and I'm making friends with all these gay people and everyone's drinking and everyone's partying. And I'm now trying to fit in with that. And I couldn't. It was just the weirdest. I remember I was drinking so much. Oh my goodness. I was drinking so much. Thinking that like if I got drunk enough, like I would be able to pull out of me the real person that is somewhere hiding.
Oh, wow. So you said you were in college at this point?
Mm-hmm.
So you 18, 19, maybe 20 years old. You spent most of your life kind of putting this persona on so that you would, quote unquote, be safe from people kind of reporting back to your dad or for quote unquote, bringing shame to the family or to the name. And so now you've lived this, fake Kenton in a way.
Yeah.
And you don't know how to tap into the real person. So you think, oh, if I drink enough, maybe I'll get there.
Yeah. I mean, and it stays with you because,
oh man.
I mean, my best friend outside of that was a musical theater girl. And it's so funny because I remember we would listen to Rent all the time and just between you and me and everybody listening to this, I hate Rent. And
what?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, fine.
I know. It was a thing. I didn't understand it. I don't know, maybe it felt too sexual at the time or something, but I was just very uncomfortable with it all the time. And all my friends were singing along to it, listening to it, screaming at the top of their lungs about taking AZT. And I'm just like, what is happening? But I went along with that. So then I didn't fit in there. I didn't fit in church. And it wasn't like I did, honestly, it wasn't like I did that great of a job at covering anything up. It was just a matter of not being a problem. Because even as I'm speaking to you right now, it's not like, I can butch up my voice and people don't really know what's going on, like that's not who I am. But I can tell you that this happened from a very young age because I remember even, gosh, I must have been like 10 or something or 9. I was getting beat up at church. Oh. It was a really weird thing. And looking back on it, I understand now why it was happening. But as somebody that wasn't even aware of his own sexuality, I couldn't understand why I was being singled out so often.
Oh. So you were getting beat up for being gay before you really realized you were gay?
Yeah.
Oh, that breaks my heart.
And I couldn't understand why I couldn't fit in. And I remember saying, because I was actually doing really well at school. I loved school. Gosh, and I remember like my mom was heartbroken. She was like, what do we do? What do we do? Because she can't just tear everything down because my dad works there. There was this time where I remember thinking to myself that church is supposed to be a sanctuary.
Right.
It's supposed to be the safe haven away from the world. And if I'm getting attacked in the safe haven, where do I have to go? Is there anywhere that's safe?
It's interesting. You keep that word keeps coming up, safe. So I definitely feel like we could talk about feeling not safe enough because you talk about it with your dad and people kind of reporting back to him or reporting back to your mom or family or tattletaling on how you're behaving or acting. But even before that, before you realized you were gay, you have these kids beating you up at church. Exactly what you said, the place that's supposed to feel safe, not feeling safe anymore. Was there ever a moment later on where you realized, yeah, I don't feel safe in this environment, in this home?
Ooh.
Or is it something that now as an adult you can look back and see it? Or did you realize that when you were younger?
I didn't think we would get to this area. Yeah, I think for me, I guess that's That's really been a theme of my life, not feeling safe. Not feeling safe enough to be myself and not knowing how to get to places where that feels that way. And I think that's actually, that's been a theme of my life just in terms of relationships and who I surround myself with. It's always, what do I need to do to make myself as safe as possible? In a world like we are in the nation that we are in, there really isn't. Especially now, I feel that very, very, very strongly. My friends aren't safe.
It's particularly a time that's not safe for, queer people or people of color, Black people. So it is interesting that we're talking about that now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, and I was just talking to our friend Daisha about this. I try not to read about it, but just from the start of the pandemic till now, there have been 832 hate crimes against Asians.
Jesus.
In California alone.
Jesus.
And that's just reported. In addition to actually catching the virus, then we have catching hate. Then we have our friends out there fighting for their lives. It's a journey trying to find a space and create a space. I think that's the thing that has really changed, and we will get to this as we move further down the line in my life, but I think that's something that is changing for me, is that I'm realizing there is no safe space for me. I have to make that space.
Okay, I definitely want to talk about that, but it's interesting because of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I almost forgot that at the beginning of COVID, you're absolutely right. That was a big thing because of the way our president was referring to, the coronavirus, blaming, China for it and calling it the China virus or whatever he named it. I actually know a couple of people. I know this one girl, I won't say her name because I don't want to out her, though she wrote about it on Instagram. She was in New York City, Manhattan, and she was walking down the street with her dog, and she's Chinese, and this man not only called her a derogatory name, then kicked her dog. What kind of person kicks a dog? And it just made my heart sink. It made me so sad because obviously it's horrific, but also, now more than ever, we need to be kind to each other. So to have something like that happen, at the beginning of a global pandemic is just who are these people? And I try to be empathetic and feel if someone is doing something so horrific, they must be in a lot of pain. But sometimes it's really hard to do that.
Yeah, I think it's hard to keep that hope in you when you see things like that. But the thing I always try to keep in mind is, the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear.
Oh, I love that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and people doing these terrible things are afraid. They're afraid of themselves. They're afraid of what happens if they have to take accountability for what's happening around them. And it just feels safer to have something to focus that fear on.
Mm-hmm. To blame someone.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's real scary about this time, right? Is that there's so many people you can blame, and none of them are at fault. There is an invisible enemy.
One person.
Well, yes.
Is at fault.
Yes. In terms of what we could do. Yes. In terms of what what actually sparked it, we have an invisible enemy. And this invisible enemy then recruits a lot of other shameful, scary things inside of many of us. I think it's a hard thing for us to imagine that we are all capable of the same amount of hate if we get scared enough.
Oh, that's really interesting, yeah.
Maybe that's something that has always been there in me as well, is just this desire to always feel compassion.
Yep.
And to understand people who are actively working against you, to find a way to reach them. And even though it's not my responsibility, it's not anyone's responsibility, that's not going to get shit done. And that sucks.
Yeah.
But it's, but there's so many people out there on the streets. There's so many people who are very vocal, who are very angry and have every right to be so. And I support them fully in that.
I want to talk about what you do now. You are a very talented singer. I mean, I might have to get you to sing at some point during this interview. And you're an amazing songwriter, but you're also an extremely talented actor. I have witnessed that over and over again in class together, and then I witnessed that on set. Kenton played Quinn on the show Perfect Harmony on NBC that I wrote for, and it was such a pleasure to see him in action. He got to do everything that he does so well. He got to sing, he got to dance, he got to act. Question, did the arts feel like a safe place for you? Is that how you gravitated towards that?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting how I came about to it, because I have been writing music since I was little, very little. But I've always written, for those people that have known me for a really long time and have been subject to my crazed middle of the night calling people being like, "Can you listen to this?" I've been very dark my entire life. I have a maelstrom of conflicting emotions just swirling about inside my spirit. It comes out in song so that I can be more joyous and more bubbly. And I think that's something that has always surprised people about me if they don't know that I sing, if they don't know my music and whatnot, which I find really funny that there is that dichotomy, and why I often don't tell people when I first meet them that I sing at all, because I want them to know me as a person first.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because I am, like, I mean, you know this, like I'm bubbly. I'm just...
For sure. Yeah. You light up a room for sure.
Oh, thanks. I have this very effervescent quality about myself, and it just comes up. Part of it is just me, and part of it, I think, is just instinct from surviving over these years. I'm not mad about it, but it just is how I am now.
So you've been writing since you were a kid, and then you were singing in church, you said, as well earlier. Yeah, and then how did that evolve into trying to do it for a career or doing it as a career? And then also, how did acting come into play?
When I was in high school, I did theater. I did musicals. I took drama classes and whatnot, and I also did competitions. And then when I went to college, I kind of just tried to stop doing it. When I first got there, I wanted to be a math teacher. I wanted to then move back to my hometown and teach high school for the rest of my life. I'm so glad that I pretty much failed right out of it when I got to college, because I realized that being number 2 in your high school makes you last in college, because everybody was number 1 in their high school. I was like way over my head, and the classes are graded on a curve. So yes, I was going to fail. So before I could fail, I dropped out and became... What was that first? I was a psychology major first. So I worked at a psychology lab testing twins for psychopathy. That was the whole thing. And then I auditioned for jazz choir. I joined a jazz choir because I still needed some music in my life. And then everything just flipped. I just realized, oh my goodness, because I was raised on classical music. I played violin growing up, and I'd always done musicals and stuff in high school, but I just never really took it that seriously. And then things just flipped for me, and I said, look, I'm so unhappy. I'm so unhappy, and I'm just drunk all the time, and I have no purpose, and I don't know who I am, and I don't know how to deal with myself. I'm trying to become a psychologist so that I can psychoanalyze myself. It just didn't work. So I thought, okay, well, what do I know? What is the language that I actually am good at? And that was music. So I threw myself into it, and I said, I'm going to learn as much as I can about music and expressing myself, which always led me to the theatrical side of it.
Right.
And so I was a theater minor as well as a jazz major. So I did some plays and I did some musicals while I was in college. But honestly, the funny thing about it is that every single moment in my life that was possible, I tried to run away from doing it.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean?
Because I needed some sense of stability. So there we go again. Like,
safe. Yeah, you wanted to feel safe, and it's it doesn't feel safe to well, it doesn't feel safe, honestly, to pursue the arts in general, because it's such an unstable business, whether you're in music or acting or a writer or anything in entertainment or in the arts. I think even if you're like a painter, like all these things are so much harder to be successful in than if you become X, Y, or Z, where there is a straight line to success. Like you work hard enough, put in enough years, you're going to get that promotion. You're going to get X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
Versus in the arts, everything is so up in the air and can be very scary and feel not very safe.
Yeah. I mean, touring is not going to come back for at least another year.
Oh, man.
So, I really feel for all my musician friends, and we're doing the best that we can, but there's only so many remote things you can do, and there's only so many drive-in shows that I can do that people are willing to come to. And so the thing is, so I graduated college, and I was recruited to this reality show. Oh gosh.
Name the show.
The Sing Off.
Yes.
Wait, you know about this?
I totally Googled you and saw that you were on the Sing Off. So yes, I didn't know that though before this interview.
Yeah, it's actually funny. One of my castmates from Perfect Harmony, Desi, knows me from that show.
Oh my God. Was she on it too?
No. So when we first met, I was like, "Hi, I'm Kenton." She goes, "Oh, I know who you are." I'm like, "Wait, what?" And I was like, "Oh, did you know me from?" And here I am being the doofus that I am. I'm like, "Did you know me from like my YouTube videos or my?" She goes, "No, the Sing Off." I went, "Oh." And she's like, "Your arrangement of Landslide was so great."
You know what's so crazy? I feel like now that I think about it, because I watched that show, I'm like, I think I know you from the Sing Off.
What?
like that was the one hosted by Nick Lachey, right? Yeah. No, I was obsessed with that show, and I remember, yeah, Damien and I loved that show. I remember him being a little bummed that he wasn't asked to audition for to be the host.
Yeah, he would have been a great host.
Or maybe he did audition. I don't remember. Anyway, I do remember watching that show, and I do remember the group I think that you were in. So now I'm like, oh my God, I did know Kenton from that.
I mean, what's really interesting about it, I think, is that entire experience fucked with my mind so hard.
How? Why? Tell me.
In terms of not feeling seen, not feeling safe, not feeling whatever, like it's so much of that. I became everything that was an issue in my life just became so much bigger. I mean, when I was on that show, I was recruited to be one of the faces of it, right? And as much as I was afraid of doing that, I also felt very slighted when they actually had somebody else be the face of it. And so then I became the music director of that group, and I'm dealing with 10 different personalities of people that are fresh out of college or in college, and there's just so much behind the scenes drama with everybody, and there was a lot of entanglements, if you will. And I have to deal with that. And I have to be the person to say, like, we need to get down to business, because if we don't, we're going to get kicked off the show.
So you guys weren't actually a group before that? They put you together? Is that a secret of the Sing Off?
I mean, it's been years now, so I'm sure we can talk about it openly. My friend Ben Bram, who is now a prolific producer and has 3 Grammys, is the arranger for Pentatonics, and he helped found that group as well.
Oh, wow.
He originally was going to audition with our group, and then he got picked up by the show to arrange for groups.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
so it's really crazy how that happened. So basically, like, then we would collaborate to arrange stuff while I was still music directing the group, because I mean, I didn't have time to do everything as well. And honestly, I just didn't want to arrange, because when I initially agreed to be a part of the group, I had been music director of our a cappella group in college, and I specifically said, I will do this if I don't have to music direct or arrange.
Of course, they made you do it anyway.
Of course.
So now you're on this show. Remind me how you guys did on the show. Did you win the show?
We did not. We got 3rd.
Okay, that's pretty great.
It was pretty great. And it was just a really interesting experience. I met more people than I ever had yet. I'm a California boy. I just never left. And here I am meeting everybody from across the nation. Really just learning to love so many different types of people, if you will, with different musical stylings, even though we all just use our voices and whatnot. And we are also, once again, drinking so much and just getting to know each other through all of that. And here I am thinking, I mean, this is a real thing. You know, I've been out since I was 15. I am open. Everything's fine. And yet the reality of it is I'm still trying to run away from myself. I'm still not quite understanding how to interact with people in a way that was truly authentic, I would say. And so I would kind of vacillate between this completely stifled version of myself and this like yearning to be this sexual monster thing, which is so strange. And I remember this friend of mine from college, my freshman year, Jenny, she literally said to me, she said, there is a monster inside you, this sexual monster. And she's like, and I just want to bring it out.
So you feel like you were trying to suppress that part of you?
Yeah, for a very long time. When you're taught at such a young age that your sexuality is a demon, you don't just get over it by coming out.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, I don't get it all the way, obviously. But how I can imagine it is because I went to 12 years of Catholic school, and we're taught so much guilt, especially around sex and sexuality. And as a heterosexual woman, I obviously don't have the church telling me that the way I love is wrong. However, I do remember feeling, and still, I mean, if I'm being honest, still feeling like sex is kind of dirty or wrong unless you're married and trying to have a baby. And, you know, masturbation is wrong. And all these things that you're told as a kid, you don't realize like seep into you. Like even when you think you're an adult and you're over that and you're not going to church every Sunday, it's still there. It's still...
This shit stays with you.
That shit stays with you, yeah.
I really did have this dream of mine that I was going to be this out and proud Christian kid, and that I was going to prove to people that you can be both, and that somehow that by my being this openly moral person that is not sexualized, that I could win people over to quote unquote our side. Which, looking back on it now, it's just such bullshit. It's the whole idea of like, I just wanted a seat at the table. I just wanted to be seen as worthy. And when the truth of it is, this table was never meant for me. I just need to find my own space. Not to say that anybody that is gay can't ever be Christian, but that's just not the path for me anymore. Okay, so you take that kid, right? Then you throw him on tour with Ben Folds, and we like tour the US. And so then you have this cross section of all the issues, all the insecurities, and it was just astounding. I'm feeling super isolated, and I'm going to city after city, meeting people across America, and just realizing so much in terms of the panic that I felt in being both gay and Asian. And I mean, I was going to, North Carolina and Tennessee, Georgia and Virginia. And I remember there was this moment in Boone, North Carolina, I think, where I was in the elevator with this man. And this is what we would consider a microaggression, but it just stayed with me. And we were just in this elevator, and he kind of just looked at me, and he just says, Japanese? And I went, no. Oh, Vietnamese? And I'm like, no, I'm Chinese. And he goes, oh, I served in Vietnam.
Oh boy.
And I just went, okay. Okay. And I didn't know what to say. I was like, thank you for your service. I don't know. I don't even know what that war accomplished, but okay, thank you. And then he literally goes, ni hao, and then bows.
Oh my God.
And it was just like the weirdest thing, because that was pervasive in every single city that I went to. And if it wasn't that, it was this weird thing where I sang Toxic. I was doing all sorts of expressions, but they weren't fully out. It was just like I was just singing these songs that were normally for like female pop stars and whatnot, right? And even then, I sang a song about like hookup culture and whatnot. Like some girl came up to me after a show. I mean, she must have been like, 16 or whatnot. And she just says, are you LDS? And for those of you that don't know, LDS, Latter-day Saints.
Oh.
The fact that she knew that I would know that. It was crazy. I just was like, I don't even, how do you know that I know that? And I said, I'm not, but one of my best friends growing up is. And she just looks at me, she goes, I knew it. I knew it. I could feel it in your spirit.
What do you think she meant by that?
There is this innocence about me. There is this sense of lightness that I think comes with growing up with belief. And I think that stays with you. And as frustrating as that is for me some days, because it's like you can take the kid out of the church, but you can never take the church out of the kid, in the way that I speak, in how I'm so careful with my words, and that I think, I think about every speech of mine 5 times before I even utter a sentence, is something that stays with me, and you can hear it in the way that I speak. It's so important to me to be articulate. It's so important to me to not let my emotions ever get the worst of me.
It's all really ingrained in you still. That feeling from when you were a child that you had to be a certain way.
Yeah.
To not only be accepted, but to also feel safe, but to also kind of not piss off your parents in a sense.
Every moment is a pulpit. Don't get me wrong, for those of my friends that are going to listen to this, that you know what I'm talking about. I'm very dear friends with people who are not religious. And I just remember there was this one family dinner that we had together. And it's happened several times with them now. We're about to eat, and one of them turns to me and says, will you pray? I get it, because it's like, well, nobody else has ever had experience in this. But the fact of the matter is, like, praying is really triggering for me.
Oh, interesting.
Because then I'm saying these things that I was taught, and then I start thinking about the fact that, like, I spent years sitting in the front row of my church while my pastor shouted about homosexuals bringing the world to hell.
When you say your pastor, do you mean your father or a different pastor?
No. So my father preached on the other side of the church. So it's something that, like, I don't think many people know about. But when you go to, like, a Chinese church, it's a multi-language church. All the older adults will go to one side, and that'll be in Chinese, and they sing hymns and they do all that stuff. And then the other side is the much younger kids who basically, it seems like I don't know if you know what Hillsong is or Saddleback is. It's more like those younger churches.
Okay.
And it seems more like those multi-ethnic churches where, they sing those, like, songs that sound like they could have been written by Pink, and
Right.
and everyone lifts their hands up. I mean, I was a worship leader as well.
And is that side in English then?
Yes. So that side is in English. And yeah, I mean, there's one very specific moment where I remember I was sitting in the front. I had my notes. I took notes every single Sunday. And I'm just writing this stuff down. And I guess San Francisco at that time, if I remember correctly, was one of the first places where they decided, just that city, they're like, we're going to legalize this shit, right? Actually, what was that? Was that Newsom? I don't know. It was such a long time ago. But they had decided they were going to legalize and recognize, gay marriage before everybody else did. And my pastor cried on the pulpit and just said, they are making a mockery of us. And the thing is, I loved that man. I in many ways, I still do. And I know he had a big heart. And I think that's where it gets so hard and confusing, and probably why I still try so hard to make so many relationships work, even when it's like 2 years past due.
When you know it's wrong for you, you try to make it work anyway.
Yeah, because I can feel it. And maybe that's what it is to be, the victim of abuse or whatever, because I know what it's like to love someone and know that they love you, and still to listen to that type of language that just tears you apart and makes you feel completely invalidated as a human being. And the truth of the matter is, I never cried about it. I never cried about it until way later in life, because it did not feel safe to cry, because I felt like if I let these feelings out, there's no coming back from it. And if I recognize that this hurts me, then how do I even pick up the pieces again? So I would stay awake at night and just not sleep. I did not sleep because in my mind, I thought, okay, if I fall asleep and I accidentally die, I don't know, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be burning in hell.
Oh my goodness.
And that's just what I thought. And it was like, there's no point in crying. It's not productive. So figure out what to do with your life and figure out how you can change things around and use that and this is something that was told to me by someone at church, use that gift of loneliness in your life so that you can use it to shine the light of God to the world.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, there's a lot there.
So basically throughout your childhood and even into your adulthood, church didn't feel safe because whether it was your dad being a pastor or someone else being a pastor, it didn't matter. You still had to either feel like you were on your best behavior or you were listening to kind of anti-homosexuality rhetoric. Then you go on to adulthood, college, you still say that you don't necessarily feel safe or that you belong. On tour, same thing. But now today, Kenton today, adult Kenton, actor, singer, songwriter, adult Kenton. How are you feeling today as far as feeling safe or feeling like you belong?
Well, I got to give a lot of thanks to my therapist. Mm-hmm. I have been out to my parents for probably like a decade now. It's not easy. We constantly have to go back and revisit things all the time. But I've realized for me, I tried so hard to keep going back to church. And even though it didn't feel safe, I still kept trying to make it work. And I went church hopping and whatnot. And then I was still getting involved in different friendships, relationships that were just very traumatizing to me. I wrote a short film about that. So, which we don't have to talk about, but about, in which I was still holding on to relationships that were unhealthy for me. And it's taken me years to the point where I've started to realize that I'm not that kid, and church is not going to feel safe. And maybe there is going to be somewhere in the future down the line for me, but I got to stop looking for it because that search is just driving me crazy and I feel much safer without it. And so now I'm actively trying to create spaces and tell stories from a very authentic place for me. And what's really interesting about it is if you look at my work with Postmodern Jukebox or Scary Pockets and whatnot, a lot of people say this about me now where they sense this sexual energy in the way I perform. And they're like, oh my goodness, it's so sultry. It's so whatever. It's so delicious. And and the irony of it is that I'm not, I am that, but I'm also not in that sense because I think I still have that lightness about me. And so I think that's what's so alluring about when you watch some things that I do that can seem overtly sexual is that I never really quite get to a place that it's just all about sex. It's always about this expression of joy and expression of self. And I think that's where I've come to terms with it.
Well, it feels honest. I can say from seeing you perform or watching your music videos, it feels authentic to who you are. But then knowing you in person, I would never describe you as a sexual being or a sexual person. You're just like Kenton, this fun, light person that I love to hang out with. So I can see that two sides of the coin thing. But I also think that's kind of common with people, with performers. A lot of I always think about Janet Jackson. She is the most shy and timid person in an interview. And then she gets on stage and she's just this amazing sexual being who you just can't keep your eyes off of. And I think, not going too deep into the Jackson family, but we all know a lot of their history and the trauma surrounding that and what was put on her as far as not being able to be her true self. And so I think it's an interesting thing that you see happen a lot. Kids who are kind of stifled in a sense, feeling this later on kind of discovering this part of them that they can let out, but not always. It's I'll show you a little bit, but I won't show you all of it.
I think more and more now I'm just myself, but I have always felt that when I am on stage, it is a moment in which I lose myself. And it's so beautiful because there are these constraints, because there is the safety of the fact that the audience isn't ever going to touch me. And that what they see is actually something that I control, that I can do anything and I can be anything. There is this gift of that communion on stage. In that, I am sharing this experience and I can be anything you want me to be. You want me to be this wild, crazy sexual character and, be basically naked on stage? Great. I'm having a great time. And I have no problem with that because it's not I don't have to deal with what happens after as a person with you, because I know that entity on stage is separate from me.
I love that. So it sounds to me that you get your feeling of safetyness on stage, or in performing, I should say.
Oh, I have never felt more safe than when I am on stage. I have never felt...
Yay! I love hearing that. Say that again.
I have never felt more safe than when I am on stage.
Oh, I love that.
I think that's why I love it, because it's this losing of self. I don't have to think about my insecurities. And it's this moment of, if I fuck up, if I don't remember lyrics, if I whatever, right? I still have the purpose of why I am there, and everybody's in it with me, and I can feel the fact that everybody wants me to succeed. And I get so nerdy when we really talk about it, but it's this sense that, like, I am just a conduit and I'm just a vessel. So I'm like a medium to these different spirits that are coming through as I perform. So if something comes through me and wants to be a certain way, then that's great, and that's going to change. Now, do I get stage fright? Yes. Do I get insecure? Yes. But there are these moments of just sublime, just existentialism, I guess, in the sense where literally I just completely lose who I am, and I just focus on what's in front of me. And you can literally, God, it's really hard to like talk about it without getting emotional, because you can literally feel like every person's journey while you are there. And I don't know any other way to describe that. But when you're in a room, especially for me when I'm doing like deeply personal songs and I'm doing my own shows with my band Bridesmen and whatnot, like there are moments in the room where you can literally feel every single person's sorrow, their sadness, their joy, and what they are there for. And there's this understanding for me where I feel like I actually understand why I've gone through everything I have, because I'm able to now give this experience to somebody else.
That is so beautiful. Oh my God. I got chills hearing you say that, because I mean, that's the magic of the arts. That's the magic of performing. That's the magic of being a singer or an actor. And it's such a beautiful evolution to get to that point.
Yeah.
Wow. So, okay. This has been amazing. And I feel like I need to hear you sing, Kenton. I think we need to hear just a little bit something for our audience, just like a little teaser so that they can then go on your YouTube page and take it all in. But just a little teaser to close up the show would be great.
Yeah. I mean, okay. What about the song that you recently heard? That probably might be good. I'll sing the chorus. This is the chorus of "Hey Doctor" by my band Bridesmen, aka me. Just tell me when it's over. Do you think I'll learn to love myself? Just tell me when it's over. Will I finally break out of this cell? Just tell me when it's over. I wanna see how it's gonna be when it's over, 'cause I'm oh so overwhelmed.
Oh my God. I fucking love you. That was beautiful. You have the best voice. I'm going to say this. I am so jealous of your voice, because that is the one thing I've always prayed, wished I had is a beautiful singing voice. And yours is so raw and beautiful. And thank you so much for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure. Honestly, I have looked up to you for a very long time, probably as long as I've known you.
Oh my God.
I want you to know that. So I think that everything that you do is so inspiring, and the way that you just boldly and fearlessly seem to pursue the things that you want in life and get them done is just remarkable and very inspiring. So
thank you, Kenton. Thank you. I'm blushing. You can't see it, but I am blushing, and I'm trying to get better at taking compliments. So thank you very much. Please tell our audience before you go where they can find you and what you have going on.
Okay, yeah. So there's lots of stuff that I'm doing right now. I'm currently working on a new album, and it'll be out. It was going to be out in August, but I think we're kind of taking our sweet time to make sure that it's perfect. Well, it won't be perfect, but great. And so it'll be out I think I'm going to do both Kenton Chen and Bridesmen. So it'll be part 1, part 2 in both names. I explain the whole Bridesman thing in interviews. You can look that up in terms of why I call it that. And then my Instagram is It's Kenton, ITSKENTON. I have an episode of Room 104 coming out. It's in, I want to say, a week or 2. So by the time this comes out, it should be available now on HBO.
Yeah, that's on HBO, right?
Yeah, we are the season premiere. I'm very excited for that because I kind of get to lose my shit.
Ooh, can't wait to watch that.
Yeah, it's really fun.
This was lovely. Thank you so much, Kenton.
My pleasure. I really, this has been great.
Okay, so today's Afterthought is on the topic of religion. Like I mentioned in this episode, I went to 12 years of Catholic school, which means I had 12 years of religion class and 12 years of church every week. I received all my sacraments from baptism to communion to confirmation. Well, I guess not all my sacraments because I did not have a religious wedding, so I fell short on the Catholic marriage of it all. And while I do not consider myself religious or Catholic anymore, I'm still deeply instilled with Catholic guilt and morals, which is sometimes a bummer and can be restricting. But I also see the benefit of religion. Like when I first moved to LA, I started going to church again after about 10 years of not stepping inside of one, just because I really felt the need for community. I found a church that I loved. It was a diverse congregation. The priest was modern and cool, and there was even a band, which is unheard of in a Catholic church. But then one Sunday, there was a visiting priest from Ireland whose homily started bashing homosexuality and abortion. I can't even tell you how he got there from a biblical scripture, but he did. And I instantly felt uncomfortable. My stomach started to hurt, and I didn't want to be there anymore. So I never went back. And I know he was just a visiting priest, but it reminded me of the bigger picture. And sometimes I really miss that church. I miss that sense of community, but I'm also so anti a lot of what the establishment of church stands for. And it's really hard to bring myself to go back. And while I understand the importance and necessity of church for some people, I also feel like my personal connection with God is enough for me. I just wish that the Catholic Church, and all religions for that matter, would be less political and just teach love and acceptance. And maybe that's a liberal, woo-woo way to think, but if we really look at the stories of Jesus, and after 12 years of religion class, I know them well, he never discriminated against anyone and only taught love and forgiveness. So isn't that what Christianity should truly teach? I don't know. That's just my afterthought, and I would love to hear yours. So please leave a comment on our Instagram account, NotBlankEnoughPod, with your thoughts. I would love to hear from you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Not Blank Enough. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. And follow us on Instagram at NotBlankEnoughPod. Until next time, thank you for listening. Check the show notes for links and info about today's guest. This episode was produced during the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 and recorded remotely. Our show today was produced by Gracie Mercedes and Dave Hill and edited by Douglas Sarine and Colleen Beasley. Not Blank Enough is a Gumption Pictures production.